Welcome to our school's podcast.
Absolutely gasping for a coffee. Now, Central Perk. There's Oh, Joey. How are you? You alright?
I have an audition for this play, and for some of it I have to speak French, which, according to my resume, I'm fluent in.
I'm not going to lie to you, French is not a strong point of mine.
Will you help me? I really want to be in this play.
Right, let me see the script there. Right, so apparently all you've got to say is, hello, my name is Joey. So let's try this. Je m'appelle Joey.
Je te coupe plow.
No. Je m'appelle Joey.
Je te plie blue.
Right, well that sounds absolutely nothing like what I'm saying right now.
Sounds exactly the same to me.
Right, let's try one more time. Je m'appelle Joey.
Je te floop flee.
Dear glasses. Right, let's try slowing this down a wee bit, okay? Alright. Je m'appelle.
Pelle.
There we go. Now let's just try putting a little bit of speed into it now. Je m'appelle.
Pelle.
Je m'appelle.
Me poo-poo.
Dear bless us, start the podcast.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
You are more than welcome to Lurgan Junior High School's third podcast. Thank you so much for downloading this week. And can I just take a moment and say thank you for downloading the past 2 weeks as well. We're sitting at 1,325 downloads over the two podcasts the last 2 weeks, which is more than we ever thought we would get. So on behalf of myself and the staff of the school, we just want to say thank you for allowing us to bring a little bit of distraction and enjoyment into your life for 45 minutes over the past 2 weeks, and 3 weeks if you're listening today. We've got a great podcast lined up for you this afternoon or this morning or this evening, whenever you're listening to us. We've got more pupils, more teachers, more games, and we're going to hand over to Clara and Evie Adams, who are going to tell us what's coming up on this week's podcast.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Thanks, Mr. Lunn. Coming up this week in the podcast, Miss Quinn and Mrs. Wright battle it out in a game of Ant and Dex, Read My Lips.
Miss Kelly, Mrs. Kerr, Mrs. O'Reilly and Mr. Long make an attempt at Lurgan Junior High to word tango, which ended in disaster.
Making a guest appearance this week, Dixie and his guitar dropped into the podcast to challenge Mr. Guy, Mr. Logan and Mr. Lunn in a game of Guess the Lyrics.
The much anticipated return of Mr. Black Jr. sees him return to the podcast this week, playing a piece of music from the Titanic and reacting to Mr. Guy's claims that he was using a bike to complete his 5k runs.
Coming towards the end of the podcast, Martha and Lila Grace from Year 9 took on the very competitive Miss Osborne in a game of the Wheel of Challenge.
And finishing the podcast, like every week, there was an 8G edition of Driveway Catchphrase between Mrs. Gray and Mrs. Wilkinson. Enjoy.
Back to you, Mr. Lunn.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
Thank you to Clara and Evie Adams there. And if you would like to get involved in our podcast, if you head over to Instagram at LJHS_podcast and give us a follow, we would love to get as many of you involved in the podcast as possible over the next few weeks. But up first, we have Miss Quinn and Mrs. Wright, who dropped past this week to play a game of Read My Lips.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Okay, the next feature on the podcast, we have two members of staff taking part in a game called Read My Lips. Now, this is a bit of a rip-off from Ant and Dec, and we've got Miss Quinn and Mrs. Wright. How are you both?
Hello, how are you?
Good. Excellent, good. Now, basically, to explain to people who are listening at home, I've got Miss Quinn and Mrs. Wright both to have a set of earphones and their phone ready, and they're going to play some heavy metal music into their ears. And the other one is going to try and go through as many names of famous people or famous singers as possible in 60 seconds for the other person to try and guess. And they'll obviously not be able to hear what the person is saying, so we have to read our lips. But thankfully, myself and everybody who's listening to the podcast will be able to hear the names that Mrs. Wright or Miss Quinn are saying, but the other person won't. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Does it?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Potentially. Okay, so up first, I think we'll have Miss Quinn. If you put your earphones in,
Okay.
and Mrs. Wright is going to be the one giving you the list of famous people. Now, am I right in thinking, Mrs. Wright, do you have a list of famous singers?
I do indeed, yes.
Right. So, Miss Quinn, these are all famous singers.
Okay,
Right, that
okay.
you have to guess. And you just say the first thing that you think whenever you think you can see what Mrs. Wright is saying. You
I
just...
think I'm going to be terrible at this. But we'll go for it.
Right, get a bit of Iron Maiden or Nirvana there. What are you playing into your ears?
I am just playing anything from Spotify, just whatever playlist comes up first.
Good. Right, so if you hit play and then we'll ask if you can hear us.
Okay.
Can you hear us at all, what we're saying? Can you hear anything? No, I'm guessing by Mrs. Quinn's reactions you can't hear anything. That's good. Mrs. Wright, you're up first. You've got 60 seconds on the clock. 3, 2, 1, go.
Camila Cabello. Can you say it? Camila Cabello?
Yep.
Pass.
Pass.
Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber. Yes, well done. Yes. Taylor Swift. Celine Dion. Taylor Swift. I don't. Pass. Harry Styles. Yes. Katy Perry. Katy Perry. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson. Yes. Okay. Ariana Grande. Ariana Grande. Yeah. Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury. Pass. Whitney Houston. Wendy. Whitney Houston.
Yes. That is time. Well done.
Miss Quinn.
That was very good. I think was that 6?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep.
Yes, 6. Well done. Very good.
Oh, that was better than I thought.
Very
well done.
good.
Tough to follow.
Yep. Okay, Mrs. Wright, if you put your earphones in and get your music going there. Now, you've got famous actors.
Right. Can
okay.
I play?
Yep, you can hit play. And we'll just test if you can hear us. Can you hear us at all? Can you hear anything we're saying? No, I don't think. No, Mrs. Wright can't hear. No. She's just smiling at us, which we right, Miss Quinn, your 60 seconds starts now. 3, 2, 1, go.
Leonardo DiCaprio. Yes. Angelina Jolie. Yeah. Johnny Depp.
Stuart.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny what? Pass.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Lawrence.
Will Smith.
Wendy Smith. Will Smith.
Yes. Jennifer Aniston.
Say it again.
Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks.
Say it again.
Tom Hanks.
Tom
Hanks.
Yeah.
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie.
Time. That is time. Well done.
That was so good. Well done.
How many was that now? I've lost count of those.
It's 7. 7 she got.
7. There you go. So Mrs. Wright is our winner by 1 today. Well done, both of you. That was very good. I was actually very impressed. I thought that would be far more difficult.
I thought it would be way more difficult. I thought it was going to be terrible. Not get any.
Miss Quinn, what are your plans for the rest of today?
I'm gonna just go onto Google Classroom, answer some questions, and I was gonna do some painting, but it's not the day for it. It's wet and windy.
Now, painting is in like an artistic painting or painting over.
No, I'm not artistic. Like a fence DIY.
Mrs. Wright, what about you?
Similar to Miss Quinn, I have a few reports to do, a wee bit of schoolwork, and then I was going to head for a walk, so hopefully the rain will clear up.
Well, thank you both for taking part. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much for having us.
And hopefully see you soon.
Yes, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Thank you to Miss Quinn and Mrs. Wright. And next on the podcast, we have a real favourite of mine. This is a game that was on TV years ago. It used to be called Celebrity 2-Word Tango. We've changed it slightly on the podcast to include things to do with Lurgan Junior High School, and the Modern Languages Department popped in to have a quick game of 2-word tango. It is infuriating but enjoyable and very, very entertaining.
You You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
Up next on the podcast, we have a game of two-word tango. This is a game that can end friendships, but it's fun nonetheless. And on the line, we have the Modern Languages Department. We've got Mrs. Kerr, Mrs. Miskelly, and Mrs. O'Reilly. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Bonjour. Ça va?
Buenos dias.
Basically, there's going to be a little bit of music playing, and in the gap in the music is where we need to insert a certain word every time, and we'll go one at a time. It'll go me, Mrs. Miskelly, Mrs. Kerr, Mrs. O'Reilly, and then back to me again, and we can't hesitate. If we hesitate or we say something that's been said before, we have to start again. Right.
Absolutely. Yes, you.
Here is our topic. Our topic for this round is going to be teachers from Lurgan Junior High School.
Oh, okay.
Right, are we ready?
Yes.
Yeah. Current.
Okay, current teachers, yes, current teachers. So I'll start. Here we go for the wee gap. Let's just listen out for the gap in the music. Miss Nelson.
Miss Hawhian.
Mr. Guy.
Mrs. Graham.
Mr. McDowell.
Mrs. Wright.
Miss Hawkian.
Been said.
Sorry.
We'll go
I'm the
again.
weak link then, the weakest link.
Yeah.
No, never.
Never. Okay, here we go. Mr. Lawther.
Mrs. Moorhead. You're loving this game, Mrs. Kerr.
Sorry. Can I just tell you what happened there?
Oh, here we
My
go.
son is standing at the door of the room saying, Mom, what are you doing? Because I am on with you guys, and yet in my study is my iPad going with a meeting with Mr. McCoy, Mr. Guy, and Mrs. Muirhead, which I have left to come and do this podcast. So he has come downstairs in confusion and thinking that his mother has completely lost him. So apologies about that.
Well, there's three names you could use: Mr. McCoy, Mr. Guy, and Mrs. Muirhead.
Yeah.
We'll start one more time.
Sorry.
Mrs. McCrory.
Mr. Guy.
Mr. McCoy.
Mrs. Carson.
Mrs. Harvey.
Miss Hannah.
Mrs. Gilbert.
Mrs. Jardine.
Mr. Adley.
Mrs. Dugan.
Mr. Logan.
Mr. Lunn.
Miss McCann.
Miss Quinn.
Mr. Putz.
Miss Gamble.
Miss Bell.
You did much better that time.
Right, last round. Let's go for.
great.
Let's go for. Let's go for everyday items from around the school. Right, this is easy. There are thousands of.
It's
items.
got to be a school item.
It's got to be a school item.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
A school item.
I'll start. Here we go. Data projector.
Pencil case.
Conduct card.
Paper clip.
Protractor.
File paper.
Lunchbox.
Computer.
The lectern.
Huh? School desk.
3 C's.
I'm sweating. I'm literally sweating.
Oh my goodness.
It's too stressful.
Stressful. My heart's flying out of me.
Oh dear. Well, I think we should go for one more. One more. One more.
Same topic.
Same topic.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Whew, dear me, hold on.
Lockdown's not stressful enough.
No, I know.
Mr. Lunn decides to make it more stressful. Thanks.
Just going to open the window here.
Climb out. I you so much, Mrs. O'Reilly.
Oh dear. Right, here we go. Here we go.
Okay. What's
Oh, sorry. Go.
what's the topic? Is it still items in the school? Items, yeah.
So warm. Oh.
Stress is getting you, Mr. Lunn.
Oh dear. Right, here we go. Okay. Items in school. Hold on. A beaker.
A textbook.
PE kit.
Bunsen burner.
I was going to say that. A basketball.
A water bottle.
Pupil's desk.
Assembly hall.
A vending machine.
A check. Hi.
Sorry. I couldn't think of a thing.
I love the fact.
It's so long since I've been there.
Well, Mrs. Kerr, we know you're heading back to a meeting with the Pars today.
Yes, with the part. And to reassure my son, I have not lost the plot.
Yeah. Mrs. Muscally, what are your plans for the rest of today?
Well, I have a little workout that I have to do because I can't go running.
Oh, lovely.
I did my 5K this morning.
Okay.
Oh, did you?
Good for you, Mrs. O'Reilly.
Was it all as much fun as two-word tango, though?
No, it wasn't stressful. That was fun and stressful.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
Yeah.
thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Merci beaucoup to the Modern Languages Department. That pronunciation will infuriate all of them, but thank you to them nonetheless for that very enjoyable game of two-word tango. Mrs. O'Reilly in particular loved that little feature. Up next on the podcast this week, we have Guess the Lyrics. Again, this is a game from way back maybe in the 80s, the 1980s. Maybe some of the parents who are listening will remember this game. And Stephen Heasley, who's most commonly known as Dixie around Lurgan, he's a local celebrity in the Lurgan area and beyond. He popped into the podcast this week to help Mr. Guy, Mr. Logan, Mr. Adley and myself have a game of Guess the Lyrics. Most enjoyable, most entertaining. Enjoy.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
So we've got a game of Guess the Lyrics here with Mr. Logan, Mr. Guy, myself, and Dixie's on the line with the guitar there. It's very, very easy. Dixie's going to do 5 rounds of songs here. With each round 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's going to be a gap of 1 word, 2 word, 3 words, 4 words, 5 words. Mr. Guy, Mr. Logan, and myself are going to have to try and remember the words that Dixie leaves out to get points. Very simple, hopefully. Dixie?
Hello.
Over to you.
Lunners, before we start, can I just check, are these the real words or Dixie's take on the words? Whoa. We're ready, boys?
Yes.
You? Go for Let's go. Easy one to start off. Today is gonna be the day they're gonna throw it back to you. By now you should have somehow realized what you got. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Backbeat, the word is on the...
Too easy. Far too easy.
Easy peasy.
Right, Mr. Guy for 1 point.
Straight.
Mr. Logan.
Straight.
I have straight written down. That's 1 point each. Thank you, Dixie. Round 2. 2 words this time.
Round 2.
2 words.
1980s classic.
A 1980s.
Got my sister 6 string.
Ah, yes.
5 and down. Played it till my fingers bled. Was 69. Me and some guys from school had a band and we tried real hard. Jimmy quit.
Oh. Jimmy quit. Right, Mr. Guy, 2 words.
Got married.
Yeah, Mr. Logan.
Can we have a challenge next time? Got married.
I've got married as well. That's 3 points each.
Yes.
Right, round 3. 3 words this time.
This is where it gets tough. Maybe not for you Spice Boys, but it's tough for me. I hadn't a clue. Spice Boys. Okay. Well, I'm not really sure.
Who's-
That's Mr. Lunn and Mr. Guy.
I was going to say,
You just took the words out of my mouth, Mr. Logan.
Dixie, were you
There
ever
ain't-
called the Space Boy?
There ain't no
Sorry?
space about me.
Okay, now this one's difficult. I'll probably not be playing it right, but we'll give it a go anyway.
There's his first.
I was 6 years old. I was running from my brother and his friends, and tasted a sweet perfume on the mountain grass I rolled down. I was younger then. Take me back to when I found a broken heart, broken hip. I made friends and lost them. Made friends and lost them. And the next 3 words, please.
made friends and lost them. Mr. Guy?
Oh,
Oh,
I thought I knew this one.
somebody in the
I thought
background
lost-
said it there.
Made friends and lost a few good years, but I don't think I'm right.
I said made friends and lost them from the years. Mr. Logan?
I'm struggling. We've went from level 1 to level 10 here. Is there nothing in between?
I'm getting my daughters to help me out here, boys, in that one.
No. Can I pass, please?
Pass?
I'm going to have to. I can't even witty to say to get a laugh on the podcast.
Right, Dixie, what's the words? What are the words?
Made friends and lost them through the years.
A nightmare, right?
Right, I got 2 there. Mr. Guy, what'd you
I
get?
thought he had lost a few good years.
So you got 1 point, Mr. Guy?
Yeah, just one.
3, 5, and Mr. Logan. So Mr. Guy's on 4, I'm on 5, Mr. Logan's on 3. Right,
Here, is
Dixie.
it a point of word?
I know, well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say you could at least throw a few
Too
words.
late now, big fella.
That's being very generous, Mr. Lund.
Yeah.
Okay.
Point of word
That
round
round
4.
hurt me.
4 words.
Tonight, gonna find myself a real good time. I feel alive, and the world, I'll turn it inside out. Yeah, I'm floating around in ecstasy, so don't stop me now. Don't stop me, cause I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time. I'm a shooting star, leaping through the sky like a tiger, defying.
Oh, 4 words.
Yes, we're back to level 3 here. I've got this one.
Got
it. Like a tiger defying.
Mr. Guy, 4 words.
The laws of gravity.
Oh, nice. Nice. Mr. Logan, can you sing it?
Beautiful.
No chance. The laws of gravity, is that it?
Yes, the laws of gravity. I've got it as well. Good.
Mr. Logan, I would love to hear you singing it.
I couldn't. I would break the airwaves.
Right, so Mr. Guy's on 8, I'm on 9, Mr. Logan on 7. Last one, last round, 5 words this time. This will separate the men from the boys here.
This is fun. Here.
Where it began, I can't begin to know him, but I know it's going. Was it the spring? The spring became the summer. Hey.
Oh. 5 words.
5 words. 5 words.
Believed they never could. I think I have it.
This is embarrassing.
You're making me doubt myself.
I think I know it. But with all these songs, you sing away at them.
Right, Mr. Guy.
Who would have believed you'd come along?
Mr. Logan.
I'm doubting myself now. Who would have believed they never could?
Oh, that sounds good.
I just had who would have believed they. I couldn't think of the last 2.
Okay, well, I can say that Mr. Guy is 100% right.
Yes, get in there.
Who'd have believed you'd come along?
Who'd have believed?
There.
So Mr. Logan, what did
Mr.
you
Guy, he mightn't be the best singer in the world, but his knowledge of music is pretty good.
Mr. Logan, what did you say?
Would have believed they never could. Well wide of the mark there.
So you got 3.
How can you get 3 points for that?
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Give him 3 points.
It's maybe 3 overall. Here,
I couldn't think.
You don't need to read the scores out, Mr. Dunn. Thanks very much.
I was 13. I was 13, 11, 10. 13 to Mr. Guy, 11 to myself, and 10 to Mr. Logan. That wasn't bad.
Well done.
100 points to Dixie for playing the guitar, singing along.
Yes, thanks, Dixie.
Right, lads. Thanks a million for being on the podcast this week.
Well done, guys. Take care.
Here, Mr. Dunn, I actually did enjoy that this week. Genuinely. Thanks.
Was that the first one you enjoyed?
That's the first one.
Must have been Dixie. Must have been Dixie's input there.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
See you later. Challenge done. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Thank you to Dixie and the lads for popping into the podcast again this week. Now, our next feature will be a favourite amongst anyone who has downloaded the podcast so far. People were a little bit disappointed this person didn't make an appearance on podcast number 2, but do not fear, he is here for podcast number 3 and he has brought his recorder with him. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Mr. Black Jr.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
Now, very much back by popular demand this week is Mr. Black Jr. on the recorder. This has turned into a bit of a fan favourite amongst those who have listened to the podcast. And I know some were a little bit disappointed that Mr. Black didn't make the podcast last week. But do not fear and do not fret. He is back this week. He is here to delight his fans. Mr. Black, how are you?
Mr. Lon, how are you? I'm good.
When we last spoke, you said you would need a few weeks to practice. And I know that we were keen to get you back on the podcast last week, but you asked just for a little extra time just to practice to really perfect your recorder playing for this week. And really it has been met in the podcast by the listeners with wonderful enjoyment and laughter, and it really is a favourite.
Well, no, recorder's been one of my talents for many years, and I'm just so overjoyed to bring such wonderful music to the listeners of the podcast.
Absolutely. And you have been practicing a piece now for the last 2 weeks, because I was going to have you on last week, but then I thought I would give you an extra week just to practice.
Yeah, well, no, it's a piece that I'm familiar with. It's one that I played in school back when I was 16, but I'm glad I had an extra week there just to perfect it.
Yeah, I've heard Mr. Black practice this a number of times, and you really will not be disappointed with this. I really hope you enjoy it. I'm sure, Mr. Black, you've already done your warm-up, and I'm just going to hand over to you. I'm sure that's all done and dusted.
Yes, no, warm-up's been done there prior to your phone call, so fingers are warmed up there and my vocal cords are ready to go. So.
Well, Mr. Black, it is over to you. Less talking from us, more playing from you. It's Mr. Black Jr. on the recorder. Let's sit back, relax, and enjoy. Unbelievable.
What do you think, Mr. Lund?
I didn't think it would disappoint for a second, and it hasn't. I thought the Ghostbusters was good, but that's something special.
Yeah, that's my standout tune. Very, very. That's one of the top pieces.
Yeah, Mr. Black, I must bring this in as well. Just on the podcast last week, Mr. Guy, not only was he questioning your recorder playing, but also questioning your 5K times.
He's claiming that I'm using the bike in order to achieve those times.
I do sense a little bit of jealousy, possibly.
Little does he know I was a runner back in my youth. So I've still got the lungs for it. Just a little bit more timber than I should.
Yes, well, we can certainly hear that you've got the lungs for that anyway. But yes, I just think there's a real bit of jealousy there.
Yeah, well, a bit of healthy competition's not bad, but when it turns into jealousy, it's just not. It's not good.
Yeah. What do you have for the rest of the day, Mr. Black?
Well, I've already did my cycle to Newry and back this morning. I had myself a tasty sausage bop. I'm doing a bit of work around the back of the house here. We're doing a bit of concreting and doing a bit of a patio area. So,
well, Mr. Black, thank you as always for coming onto the podcast and giving us that moment of magic on the recorder there. I'm sure if the fans want it, then in the next couple of weeks we'll get you on for the third edition of the recorder playing.
Yeah, look forward to that.
Mr. Black, look after yourself.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Mr. Black Jr. on the recorder there does not disappoint, only gets better with more and more practice, and hopefully he'll be back next week or the week after with a musical masterclass. Up next, however, we have a new feature on the podcast. This is the Wheel of Challenge, and we had Martha McTurnahan, Lila Grace Thompson and Miss Osborne on this week. And as I said at the start of the podcast, if you would like to get involved, please give us a follow at LJHS_podcast, and we'll get in touch with you, and hopefully you can get on in the next few weeks. But for now, sit back, relax and enjoy the Wheel of Challenge.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
So up next on the podcast, we've got a Wheel of Challenge. This is a new game to the podcast, and the TD department have very kindly built me a massive wheel here that I've been able to put into the kitchen. And we've got 3 very willing contestants on the line ready to have a go at this. We've got Martha, Lila Grace and Miss Osborne. Martha, how are you? You've been keeping all right?
I'm good, thank you. It's nice having less pressure and not being as busy, but I kind of miss school.
Good. And you're coping okay with all the homeschooling and different things, yeah?
Yeah, it's fine.
Excellent. Good. And Lila Grace, what about you?
Yeah, I'm good, but I'm the same as Martha. Like, it's good being off school, but it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
At the same time.
I suppose you miss your friends a wee bit. Martha, have you been keeping in touch with people, or?
Yeah, I've been keeping in touch with my friends, mostly through FaceTime calls.
Yeah. And Lila Grace, would you be the same?
Yeah, I'm just the same.
Yeah. And you were both saying there, just before we came on here, you were both saying that you're actually working to your timetable. Lila Grace, how do you find that? So are you working literally strictly to your timetable?
Yeah, I am. I think it's just a bit easier to know what you have to do during the week.
And do you give yourself 40 minutes? So say you had history period 1 on a Monday, do you spend 40 minutes and then if whatever you get done, that's you?
Yeah, sometimes I get finished a bit earlier, so then I'll just start the next lesson after.
Brilliant, very good. And Martha, do you then stop at 3:20? If you get through the whole day, do you stop at 3:20 and say, right, or would you stop early?
Yeah, I'd mostly do that sometimes, but I usually hope to finish a bit earlier on Fridays.
Oh yes, very smart. That's maybe something we can look, Miss Osborne, in the future. Maybe school could finish early on a Friday forever.
Oh, that would be amazing. But I think we need to pass that by Mr. McCoy and Board of Governors first.
Yes.
Can't make a decision on our own.
No, you're right. What we're going to do is we're going to play Wheel of Challenge. This is how it's going to work for anybody listening. There are numerous challenges on the wheel here. I'm going to spin the wheel and Miss Osborne is going to go first, okay? And whatever challenge it lands on, Miss Osborne has 30 seconds to do that challenge in. Now, Miss Osborne can say, right, well, I think I will get this amount done in the time that I'm given, the 30 seconds, okay? And basically Martha, myself and Lila Grace will have to say, no, we think she'll get more or less done in the 30 seconds. If Miss Osborne does get it done in the 30 seconds, then she gets the point. And if she doesn't get it done in the 30 seconds, whoever out of the 3 of us was closest gets a point. Does that sound simple?
Yeah.
Miss Osborne, do you get that okay?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I'm ready.
Right, you're up first, okay? So here we go. I'm going to spin the wheel. Hopefully you can all hear the wheel being spun here. Right, okay. So, Miss Osborne, that has actually landed. It's almost like this was fixed. It's landed on your 9 times tables.
Oh no, can't let the maths department down here. Have to do well with this one.
You really can't. So
yep.
This is going to be how many of your 9 times tables you can get through in 30 seconds. Now,
Okay, so think about this.
if
I do about one every 2 seconds, we bit out for I would say I get 12 done.
Right, so Miss Osborne is saying 12. Now you have to say 9 times 1 is 9, 9 times 2 is 18, 9 times 3 is...
Yeah, or 1 times 9 is 9. That's the right way.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, apologies.
I got
it. Right, Martha, how many do you think Miss Osborne would get in 30 seconds?
I think Miss Osborne will get 15.
Oh.
Oh, the bar's set high, Martha.
There's pressure already there. Lila Grace?
I think about 10, because just to say like the full times table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Smart, yeah.
That's more realistic, probably, Lila Grace. Yes.
I'm gonna say 11. So 12, 15, 10, and 11. Miss Osborne, are you ready?
Oh, I'm feeling the pressure. Right, I'm ready.
Okay, your 30 seconds starts now. Go.
1 times 9 is 9, 2 times 9 is 18, 3 times 9 is 27, 4 times 9 is 36, 5 times 9 is 45, 6 times 9 54, 7 times 9 63, 8 times 9 72, 9 times 9 81, 10 times 9 90, 11 times 9 is 99, 12 times 9 108.
That's your time. That is your time.
Oh,
That was 12 on the money.
that's harder than you think.
I thought Martha was going to steal it there. I thought you were going to edge towards 15, but you got 12 on. That was good.
Yeah, flummoxed a wee bit in the middle, but we got there.
So that's a point. That's a point to you.
Oh, good.
Right. Now.
Right, girls, beat that.
Okay, Martha, you're up next.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to spin the wheel here. Hold on, spin our wheel. Right, now, this is an interesting one. So this is landed on chocolate bars.
Yes, I love chocolate.
Just like Miss Osborne loves Maz, this is all meant to be.
Yeah, perfect.
So chocolate bars, right. So in 30 seconds, Martha, how many chocolate bars do you think you could mention?
I'm gonna go with 15 again.
Oh, brilliant. Good. Miss Osborne, how many do you think Martha will get through?
Well, I think 12 stood me in good stead the last time, so got to go for 12.
Okay, 12. And Lila Grace?
I think 13.
13. And I'm gonna go 14. So we've got 12, 13, 14, and 15. Okay, Martha? All good? Yep. Okay, and your time starts now.
Galaxy, Whisper, Dairy Milk, Turkish Delight, Toffee Crisp, Twirl, Flake, Whisper Gold, Kit Kat Crunchy, Lion Bar, Double Decker, Kinder Bar, Galaxy Caramel, Bounty, Boost,
And that is your time. That is your time. My goodness, that was 17. 17, that is incredible.
That is a girl that has stood in the shop well above too long.
So that is 1 point to Martha now. That's good. This is incredible. Right now, my standout one there probably was Whisper Gold. I'm a big fan of Whisper Golds.
Yeah, I love that one too.
Oh, Lila Grace.
I like Bounty.
Martha, you Whisper Gold as well?
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
I also really like Bourneville.
Oh, Miss Osborne, sounds like you're a fan of that.
No, I'm not. I don't like Bourneville at all.
Is it?
I love Milky Ways.
Lila Grace, we're on to you now. So it's a point for Miss Osborne, it's a point for Martha, and now we're on to Lila Grace here. Let's see. Let's give the wheel a spin here and see what it lands on. No, this is a difficult one, I think.
Oh no.
This is car manufacturers.
Okay.
That is quite a tricky one. You can tell Mr. Poots has made this wheel. Mr. Poots loves his cars.
Lila Grace, just picture in a car park and just glance your eye around it. You'll be able to do this perfectly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've gone for. Oh, here, hold on. We haven't even taken down our guesses here. Right, Martha, how many do you think Lila Grace will get?
I'm gonna go with 16.
16. Okay, good. Miss Osborne?
12's too low, I think, for this one, because I saw how well Martha did.
Yeah.
So I'm going to up it to 14.
14. Okay, I'm going to go 15. And Lila Grace, how many do you think you can get through?
I think 17.
So we've got 14, 15, 16, 17 again.
Yeah.
Right, okay, here we go. 30 seconds starts now.
Mercedes, BMW, Seat, Volkswagen, Skoda, Mitsubishi, Hyundai, Hugo, Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, Honda, Ford, Suzuki, Fiat, Nissan, Toyota, Lexus, Citroen, Bentley.
That is your time. That was brilliant. That was 18. 18.
Oh.
My goodness.
Hold on. I
what?
think Lila Grace is like an undercover car salesperson at this rate.
That's incredible. So that's it. That's a point to Peach. A point to Peach. let me just try that again. Hold on. That's a point to Peach there. Lila Grace, what are your plans for the rest of today?
I'll probably just watch TV.
Excellent. Are you have you all your work done for the day?
Yeah.
And are you watching anything at the minute? Anything on TV or Amazon Prime or Netflix that's good at the minute?
I'm watching Riverdale, but we also have Disney Plus, so I'm watching a few movies in it too.
Lovely. Martha, what about you? What are the plans for the rest of today?
I might do a bit of baking.
Go on. What are you going to bake?
Well, I might make some carrot cake. I've made it a couple of times before.
Lovely.
Oh, nice.
Now, I'm sincerely hoping that you won't be cheating and having your mum's help with this.
No.
Well, listen, I'm going to go buy some chocolate. I'm going to look at cars to buy. And I'm going to get my 9 times tables up on the board here. Girls, you look after yourselves and stay safe. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
okay,
Miss Osborne, you look after yourselves. See you soon.
See you soon.
Okay,
Bye.
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 Thanks for tuning into our podcast.
Thank you to the girls and Miss Osborne there for taking part. Very, very impressive under the pressure of a 30-second timer there. Now, sadly, we're coming to the end of the podcast, and it's become a bit of a tradition now that we end the podcast with driveway catchphrase. In the past 2 weeks, we've had Mr. Adley defeating Mr. Logan. We've had Mrs. Walmsley defeating Mrs. Walker. And this week, it was a special HE edition of driveway catchphrase, and we had Mrs. Gray taking on Mrs. Wilkinson. Hope you enjoy.
You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
So finishing the podcast this week, as we've done the past 2 weeks, with a favourite of mine, driveway catchphrase. Last week we had Mrs. Walker and Mrs. Walmsley on driveway catchphrase, and this week we've got 2 more members of staff who are ever so willing to take part. On line 1 we have contestant number 1. Who are you and where do you come from?
Hello Mr. Lunn, it's Mrs. Wilkinson here, and I'm from marvellous Moore.
And you're up against contestant number 2 on line 2. Who are you and where do you come from?
Sorry, hello Mr. Lunn. This is Mrs. Gray here. I'm in lovely Lisburn and I'm practicing my stay-at-home motorcycling.
So we're putting a little HE slant on driveway catchphrase today. Rather than you being in the car with the tooting of the horn, you've actually got some home items that you're going to use as your buzzer. Is that correct?
It is, Mr. Lunn, because I've got a cake in the oven at the minute and I can't really leave the kitchen. So instead, I've got one of my saucepans out, and this is going to be my buzzer for today.
Outstanding. Yes, health and safety is paramount there. You're not leaving the kitchen. That's important. No running in.
Yes, we don't want any fires, Mr. Lunn, so we're keeping it safe at all times. Stay safe. That is the motto at the minute.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And Mrs. Gray, there's no denying that you are the petrol head of the HT department. And of course, from the sound clip at the start there, you're obviously on your motorcycle.
I certainly am indeed. I'm going nowhere fast, Mr. Lunn, but I am here with my motorbike.
And have you got a bell on your motorbike or a
yeah, it's not quite a bell. Those are kind of for the ones without engines, you know. But yes.
Oh, perfect. So let's get ourselves into round one of driveway catchphrase. Here we go. First one to either toot the motorcycle horn or smack the saucepan with the wooden spoon. Here we go. Mr. Chips is in Lurgan working as a courier for Lurgan Hospital. And he has a really important job of transferring human organs for transplant. Today he has a big problem as he's supposed to be delivering a heart from Lurgan to Glasgow. He picked it up yesterday, but would you believe he has actually lost it? He can't remember where he's put it. He's checked under the seat in the car, in the boot of the car, he's even checked in the garden. But the last place he looked, because he couldn't find it in any of those places, was actually in the house to see if the heart was in the house. Thankfully. Oh my goodness. Oh, Mrs. Wilkinson was just in first there, Mrs. Wilkinson.
Well, would it be home is where the heart is?
You are spot on, absolutely correct. Well done.
Oh, great.
Well done.
Thank you.
1-0 to Mrs. Wilkinson. All right, Mrs. Gray, you were almost in there, just a fraction out.
Too slow, too slow.
Here we go, catchphrase number 2. Mr. Chips is now in Texas and he's taking part in a reconstruction of the American Civil War. He is playing General Custer and he's being attacked by Red Indians and he has retreated to a fortress with another general. It's all getting a bit manic and the other general has to disappear to, shoot some bad guys and stuff like that. So he's asking Mr. Chips if he will look after the fort on his own. Oh, Mrs. Gray, this is to level it up. What do you think?
It's got to be something about hold the fort.
That's it. Spot on. Well done. It's all to play for. One apiece. This is the final.
Well done,
Mrs. Wilkinson.
This is the final catchphrase. Let's see who's going to take home all the points and prize, of which there is nothing. Mr. Chips is working as a boatman now, and he's working in Loch Ness. He sails across Loch Ness about 20 times a day, doing trips for some older members of the community to get them out and about. Also gives these older members of the community a chance to do a bit of bird watching on the loch. But sometimes you get the occasional old age pensioner who is a little bit mischievous. And every so often, one of them will think it is funny to get up and start jumping up and down on the boat, causing the boat to move rather ferociously from side. Mrs. Wilkinson to take home the victory today. What do you think it is?
Would it be Don't Rock the Boat?
Oh, well done, Mrs. Wilkinson. Well done.
Oh, bro!
Brilliant. So you are now in the elite club of Mr. Who won it the first week? Mr. Adley, I think. Mr. Adley won it the first week, and Mrs. Walmsley won it last week, and now Mrs. Wilkinson, you're up there in the driveway catchphrase winning club. Any plans for the rest of the day, Mrs. Gray? What are you up to?
Well, I'm going to put my bike back safely into the garage and then head back up to my computer and finish my Year 8-9 lesson for next week. So Year 8s, you've got all that to look forward to next week.
Lovely, lovely. And Mrs. Wilkinson, what about you, apart from the cake?
Well, maybe juggle a bit of homeschooling with my own kids, as well as a bit of schooling for the Lurgan Junior High School pupils. So I'm just getting my head around long multiplication today, Mr. Lunn. That's what was on my agenda earlier.
Well, Mrs. McGuinness will be on speed dial there if you need a bit of help.
Good idea.
Listen, thank you so much. Yes?
Can I just say before we go a big thank you and congratulations to our fabulous home economics pupils who submitted some really impressive Easter baking photos over the holidays. Just want to say that all of your home economics teachers are really proud of you, and the photos are on Facebook there for everybody to see. So well done, folks. Thank you very much.
Yes, I saw those on the Facebook. They're unbelievable.
And there'll be more coming.
Yeah. It makes me quite jealous, actually, and a bit ashamed that I would never be able to do anything like that. Listen, thank you both so much for closing the podcast this week, and I hope you stay safe.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Lunn.
very much, Mr. Lunn. Take care.
See you soon. Bye.
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 You are now tuned in to this week's episode of our podcast.
That is the end of podcast number 3. Can I just say a massive thank you to everyone who's been on the podcast today, to Joey, Clara, Evie, Miss Quinn, Mrs. Wright, Mrs. Miskelly, Mrs. Kerr, Mrs. O'Reilly, Dixie, Mr. Guy, Mr. Logan, Mr. Adley, Mr. Black Jr., Martha, Lila Grace, Miss Osborne, Mrs. Wilkinson and Mrs. Gray. There has been a big shout for Mr. Pooch and Mr. Black and Mr. Lauder for next week's podcast. Maybe if we shout loud enough, they'll give the people what they want. Whatever you have planned for the rest of this week, keep yourself safe. We have another week completed. Thanks to our pupils for all of their hard work. Thanks to parents for homeschooling. Thanks to the staff for providing work. And thank you to all those who continue to work on a daily basis as key workers. From me, thanks for allowing us to bring you this ridiculous 45 minutes of nonsense, and we will continue to do so until we get 0 downloads. But for now, bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into our podcast.